Our moderator for the session is Meenakshi Kaul from IIT Kharagpur. Meenakshi is head of cloud data storage at Ericsson. Prior to her role as a cloud data storage head, she was engineering director in the Solaris platform group, and she has been working in the software industry for more than 25 years, taking leadership positions in companies like Oracle, Sun Microsystems, Wipro, Siemens, and Texas Instruments. She has a BS in physics from IIT KGP and an ME from ISC. I'm turning it over to Meenakshi. Meenakshi Kaul Basu.
Thank you. Thank you, Surbi, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here for this panel discussion. We have esteemed founders as part of our panel, and they're going to share their journey. So I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time talking, but my main plan here is to actually seed a few questions and get them to do most of the talking. And then we will have quite a bit of time for Q&A. But I just wanted to kind of mention that Dheeraj Pandey was supposed to also have been on this panel. Unfortunately, he had a personal commitment and he cannot make it today. But I'm sure you'll get to hear him speak at one of our discussions the next time around. So as we get started, my plan is to have everybody do their introductions, and then we will open it up for question and answer for the last about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on how it goes. So let's get started. And I wanted to introduce Bipul Sinha. Most of you know him. We have Rubrik here as one of our platinum sponsors, and so I'd like to thank you, Bipul, for sponsoring us. And he has many years of experience building billion-dollar companies like Rubrik's from ground up. And he has worked in many other companies in the past, been working in Lightspeed Ventures for a significant period of time, worked on companies like Nutanix, and he has also worked in Oracle database technologies before he went into the venture space. He has a bachelor's technology degree in electrical engineering from IIT Kharagpur, and he went ahead and did an MBA from Wharton Institute, and he has many patents in the distributed computing space. So welcome, Bipul.
Thank you.
Amit Gupta, our next panelist, was the co-founder and CTO of Jasper Wireless before they got acquired into Cisco, so he's now part of Cisco. He has also been a co-founder of many other companies and CTO of many other companies in the past. He has a BTech in computer science from IIT Delhi and a PhD from Cal Berkeley. Holds a lot of patents, more than 50 patents in computer networking, distributed technologies, and distributed systems and IoT technologies. Welcome, Amit. And then we have Jyoti Bansal, who has founded AppDynamics and been very successful, who had a very good successful exit in 2016, just like Amit had in 2016 as well. He has also played many roles in a lot of companies in the Silicon Valley in the past few years. Several companies were acquired by, several of his startup companies were also acquired, been extremely successful as an entrepreneur. And he is the recipient of many leadership awards in the past. And he has a BS in computer science from IIT Delhi. So welcome. So I'd like to actually begin by asking you all to introduce yourselves, what you guys do as part of your current company. So I'd like you to start, Bipul.
Thank you. My name is Bipul Sinha, founder CEO of Rubrik. Before Rubrik, I spent many years as venture capitalist at Lightspeed Venture Partners. In fact, my mentor and our board member, Ravi Matre, is in the crowd. Thank you, Ravi, for the opportunity to bring me to Lightspeed and also being the first investor of Rubrik. And before that, I spent many years at Oracle building database system. So I'm an engineer by training, became a financier through Wharton School, and now back into building product and taking them to market. I mean, it's a very exciting time to be here in Silicon Valley as well as in the technology industry, particularly in the enterprise side, because almost all of our assumptions are up in the air. And so there are so many new things happening that is very fortunate to kind of pick an angle and really drive the technology agenda in a given market. So exciting times.
Hi, my name is Amit Gupta, and I'm part of the software engineering team at Cisco Jasper. So Jasper was founded about 12 years ago, and one of the first companies to recognize IoT not in just in terms of what it could do for the products that we see or the consumers, but more importantly for businesses, for enterprises, in transforming them from selling products to selling services with all the good value it brings in terms of recurring revenues, in terms of the product agility, and in terms of time to market. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 plus years, and I continue to do that.
Thank you, Amit.
Hi, my name is Jyoti Bansal. I'm founder of AppDynamics, founder and former CEO. AppDynamics, I started AppDynamics in 2008, and we are in application monitoring and intelligence space. AppDynamics was acquired by Cisco early this year, and right now I'm kind of technically between jobs. I'm trying to figure out what do I do next after AppDynamics is bought by Cisco.
All right. So I have another question for you. So typically, I would expect that all the startup companies typically go through, you have an ideation phase, and then you move into incubation, and then you move into scaling your companies. So can you share your journey? And I specifically want to understand, how what is the birth of that idea, and how do you take it forward and make it into a large company that you have had so far? Vipul, you want to start?
Sure. So as part of the Lightspeed investments, we'll always look for a very a unique angle in a product or market combined with a team that can drive and execute on that vision. So it's one of the things the enterprise team at Lightspeed did was to have a thesis about certain areas and then try to find entrepreneurs or try to find people who are active in that space. So one of the things that I observed was that the whole backup and recovery market had not been innovated on for almost like 10 to 15 years. And that sounded like, when I first kind of started to think about it, that sounded very weird to me that there was so much happening in the primary space and not much was happening in this space. So I started to kind of call people who were active in this space, people who were former employees of companies in that space, and I started to kind of ask them that, is this true? Am I thinking in the right direction? And then over time, it felt to me that there is a very large opportunity because of the market was fundamentally underserved. And that's when I called my friends, who are now my co-founders, to start to investigate it more formally. And then we used to get together in evenings and weekends and to kind of figure out like what is our angle in this market and how we are going to kind of disrupt the status quo, because this is a 30-year-old market. Almost some estimates are between $20 to $50 billion spent every year. And once we kind of, it took us like 4 or 5 months to have a point of view on the market. And then we went back to my partners and said that I want to start this company. And then we started incubating the company in Lightspeed. We grew from 0 employees to 13 employees in Lightspeed offices.
I see, okay.
We almost took over the whole place. And then we moved to a location in Palo Alto and started growing there.
Right. So I still want to ask the question about, when you were building your team out, the CTO, the CEO, how did you differentiate these different roles and, as you started to scale the company too? Can you comment on that for a minute?
Sure. So from the very beginning, we had an understanding that who will do what.
Okay.
So we have 4 co-founders in Rubrik. I started looking at the business side of the equation, marketing, sales, biz dev, and I was the first recruiter in the company because I had no job in the beginning when they started writing code. And then 3 of my co-founders gone into engineering like deep, and we together we started to kind of put the form to Rubrik. Obviously, in the beginning, there was a lot less business. So I used to do marketing and recruiting and product management. And over time, as the go-to-market started to kind of take shape, then I started to focus more on like sales and marketing and product management. And then we hired a recruiting team to actually move the recruiting agenda forward.
So I'd like to ask the same question to you, Jyoti.
Sure. So my story is really different than, say, what Bipul described. And every startup has a very different story. My story was, the ideation was, I was working as a software engineer in a prior company. And we were in a space that was a little bit similar to what my company ended up in the application monitoring and troubleshooting. And I realized that, that space needs a lot of innovation, that needs a lot of redo. And at some point as founder, you start burning with an idea, right? You just, you almost someone has to solve this problem.
Fire in the belly, as they say.
Yes, it's fire in the belly, as in if you don't do it, someone else will do it. And you start feeling like, the time is passing by because someone else is gonna solve this problem, right? So I had that fire of someone gotta solve this problem. And if I don't, someone else will do it. And that's how most companies get started. So in my case, it was just me, young engineer. I didn't have any business experience. I didn't have any management experience. I didn't have any venture capital experience, any of that, right? So I just started coding what I wanted to solve, the problem that I wanted to solve, and I started pitching to VCs that that I need to go and just to raise venture capital out of it. And it was a hard journey for me in the beginning. I was just one founder engineer, not prior business experience, pitching to VCs to fund a company, right? This was back in 2008. And so, but after a few months of doing that, being at it, then I was able to raise venture capital. So when I started, when I got my first round of financing was $5.5 million, and I had $5.5 million of check of money in the bank with no one else in the team. It was just me and $5.5 million, right? So then it was
Not such a bad problem.
not a bad problem, right? But it's hard. The question you ask about the team, how do you build the team now? So it's almost, I look at everything there are different milestones, right? Idea is just the beginning, very small beginning, the ideation part, right? Which is normally this kind of burning desire to do something. Then you have to get started by raising some capital. Either you bootstrap it or raise capital from someone, either seed or Series A or whatever it is, right? Then you have to build a team, which is the hard part after that. So that was to me is the next. Then I had to go and build out the team, but I couldn't attract, even though I had $5.5 million, I couldn't attract senior execs to come and work with me at that time, or senior experienced people. So I just went out and recruited some of the best engineers I knew. And so I would go and try to convince them, hey, come and join my engineering team, and we will build out this team together. And I played every role for a long time: the CEO role, the CTO role, the head of sales, head of marketing, the plumber, janitor, everything until we found the product market fit where we could afford to hire more senior people in the company. So that's how kind of my journey on what we did at AppDynamics is definitely a bit different.
Yeah, that's an interesting story too. Amit, do you want to comment, given that you were a founding CTO of Jasper?
Sure. So I think as Jyoti also mentioned, the stories are different for different companies, different paths you take. In our particular case, my two co-founders, they both came from a very strong seller background. And so they understood that space fairly well. They understood where the market was going. And they kind of saw how the seller, mind you, this is back in 2004, 2005 timeframe, a year before AWS started and a couple of years before the first iPhone came out. And so at that time, they had the vision, the foresight to be able to see that the world was going to get into a place of connected devices, where the devices would connect to the internet using cellular networks as the underlying physical layer. And they would exist primarily for communication, not for what we were using cell phones for talking, but just for machines talking to each other. And more important than that, what they also figured out was that in that world would enable businesses to go from selling products to selling services. And the third equally important part was, in the system that existed at that time, there were a lot of inefficiencies, which essentially meant that this thing would never work at scale at the price point it needed to get to. And that also became essentially our opportunity, because by figuring out that particular gap in the market, we're able to attack it and then get things going. And yeah.
All right. So Jyoti, you touched on a very interesting topic that if you didn't try to solve a particular problem, somebody else would. So clearly, time to market is very critical. What tools and technology have you been using to actually reduce the investment time and actually be able to have your products out fast? I mean, do you use any of the cloud technologies? And
sure.
Can you comment on that?
Yeah, the time to market from is very important. When there is a problem that you have identified and you have that burning drive to solve that problem, it's almost always there will be another 2 or 3 or 4 other smart entrepreneurs who have the same drive to solve the problem, right? So you'll have other competitors who are going after a similar problem if it's a real problem. So you have to get to the market fast, but you also have to get the right V1. If you get your V1 wrong, then so you try to get in the market really fast and your V1 is completely wrong and you have to redo it, then you'll be really slowed down as well. And you may not even have money left to redo it completely, right? So it's really a balance of how fast you want to get to market, but how do you get to market with the right kind of product? So that's where the involving customers in a very close feedback loop, your potential customers, while you're designing the product and building the product, and then you working with them as close design partners, it becomes key in how do you get it right and how do you do it fast? Because it's really about the iterations on learning on because you have a sense of the problem, but you have to kind of iterate on what the exact details of how you solve the problem.
So speaking of that, you have customers that you may be talking to 10, 15, 20 customers, each of them pulling you in different directions. How do you reconcile all these inputs that you're getting from everyone and make sure that you're actually going the right direction? Bipul, do you want to comment on that?
So I'm a big believer that before you talk to the customer, you need to have a point of view. You can't randomly ask questions. So you need to have a very strong point of view and then ask for their feedback on that point of view. And then you have to read between the lines of what they are saying. So the approach we took was, so we started building product January 2014, and March 31st, 2015, we had got our first purchase order. And we got our first purchase order based on a beta product. So, and we really wanted to compress the time to market, and it was a very deep stack to build. So while we were building the deep stack, building the file system from scratch, building the data management platform from scratch, cloud connectivity and search from scratch, what we did was we hired a cold caller. And so I was the pitcher and we had a cold caller. So company started in January, cold caller we hired in August. And from August till the next March, he will set up meeting and I will pitch to customers. We spoke to 40 odd customers, and going into beta, it felt to me, again, gut feeling, that we are about 80% where the market was. And when you are in the 80% range where the market was, you will find buyers to get your product, and that starts the momentum of the business.
Awesome. Amit, do you want to comment on that?
So to add to what Jyoti was just saying, so it's really important to get your V1 of the product right. So along with building the product, you're also building a company, and the company is made of the people. It's also really important to get the V1 of people right. So in my particular case, we remember that we got our funding in May, June timeframe, and until November, I was not able to hire my first engineer. So it took us a long time. We kept interviewing, didn't find the right fit, but it was important for us to be patient. It was important for us to be disciplined. Once the right person or the right group of people came on board, we had the product available in the market within about 4 months from that point onwards. But it was really important for us to stay disciplined and not hire poorly just for the sake of getting somebody in, just like it's important not to build a product and get the V1 wrong.
Okay. So just changing topics. So startup journeys have a lot of ups and downs, more downs than ups, I would think. Can you share your journey?
Certainly. So when we started our company, we raised a $10 million Series A. So it was similar to what Jyoti was saying, him and 5.5. In our case, 4 of us and 10 million. And I thought that given that I've been in venture capital for so many years and I have a pretty wide network, hiring like 20 engineers will be super easy. I'll walk out, go to Google, Facebook, and then 20 people will follow me. And I got the rudest awakening of my life. Everybody the people I knew have life situations, new job, new baby, new wife, all kinds of situations. And for first 45 days, we had 0 hire. And I remember mid-March, I used to get up 2 o'clock in the morning in sweat and think, like, what did I do with my career? I had a good career as a venture capitalist. Now I'm with this team going to build Rubrik. but they are not letting anybody pass the interview because the bar is so high. And how are we going to kind of build product? And if you're not building the product fast, then the market opportunity might disappear or situation could change. I distinctly remember telling my wife that forget about me for the next 90 days. I'm not going to have breakfast or dinner at home. And from like 7 o'clock in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock in the night, I would be out in one of the coffee shops next to Google or Facebook or YouTube office or someplace where created a pitch deck, and I used to pitch, just like pitch to customers, pitch to candidates. And we really had to turn the situation around, otherwise we would not have a product. Okay. And in the next 4 months, we hired 14 people.
Okay. Amit, you want to comment on it?
So yeah, so again, a slightly different angle. So in our case, our initial vision of the product was, I think, just right. But what we didn't have right was the channel selection or the go-to-market strategy. It ended up with a major channel conflict with some of our key partners. And so in about 3 years later, we made a significant pivot in terms of our go-to-market. And that is what essentially enabled us to get over that hump and start scaling up our business. So again, you have to be willing to look at all the decisions you're making, figure out what's working, what's not working, and then adapt as needed.
So Jyoti, I have a different question for you. So in AppDynamics, we are aware that you were going to be going IPO, and I believe that a day before, things changed, and you were acquired by Cisco. So IPO versus acquisition, can you tell us why either one of them? Since you went through both.
Sure. First of all, we were always building AppDynamics from day one to be a successful independent company, right? We were never looking to sell the company or building a company to sell. Like, my belief is that anytime as an entrepreneur you try to do that, you will fail. You have to build a very good business, like a really strong business. So we were on the path to going IPO, and we were not planning to sell the company or not looking to actively sell the company. But we were having conversations with Cisco from last year about business relationship on a resell and kind of a strategic partnership along those lines. And a few days before IPO, Cisco came and said, instead of doing the business partnership, why don't we acquire you instead of going public? And it's not that we just said, yes, we will sell. They made the first offer, we said no. They made a second offer, we said no. And they made a third offer, which we couldn't say no because it made the right kind of financial sense for all the shareholders and all the employees and was the right thing to do. Right? So it happened just a couple of days before the IPO. But it's not like that we were, it really was a matter of what's the right thing to do for all the shareholders involved, all the employees involved. Would we get a right home, a good home as a company, our product, our employees, or would that, what we're planning to do, does it get just curtailed there? So all of that was good. So that was the right choice to make.
Okay. Software patents, the whole process has got really complicated now, and the rejection rate is very high. So you, Bipul, were just talking about, going and sitting in some of these coffee houses, talking to some of the smartest people, showing them the decks. Aren't you afraid that these ideas would get taken up by somebody else? So my question specifically is, how do you build and protect this IP?
My personal point of view is that ideas are probably 1/10, if not 1/20th of the startup equation. A lot it is like how you execute on that idea. So one of the concepts that we early on adopted at Rubrik was that if you wanted to do something, you have to do it at war level. That when you go prosecute a war, there is no second thought. And how fast you go and how deep you go on anything that you do. So we didn't worry about whether somebody can take their idea. If somebody can take our idea and execute faster than us, shame on us, we should get out of the business. And that has been our kind of mantra in terms of what we do. So go to market fast, scale fast, find customer fast, recruit fast, because some people say we are a great product company and great marketing company and great sales company, but if you want truly be the greatest company, you have to be the fastest company because there is no BS in fastest.
Got it?
All of has to come together. So patent is good to have a defensive measure that somebody comes and tells you, give me so much money because of your success, here is my patent, then you can defend yourself. But it can never be the business strategy.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to comment on it?
I totally agree with him. Like there is no way you can defend your IP by patenting it. You know, the only way you defend is by executing the best on it. That you have the best engineers, you go to market fast, you sell the most, you market the most, all of that. There's no, the patents are, software patents are literally useless. But you want software patents for one reason, which is to defend against kind of frivolous lawsuits. The unfortunate part of the tech world is that, you know, if your company is successful, you would be sued by people. You would be sued by people and you know, we had that at AppDynamics, which was a very frivolous lawsuit in our there, but we had to deal with it for 3 years. And eventually we decided that we got to build a pretty strong patent portfolio of our own so that we can protect if something like that happens again. So that's other than that, it's really useless. So I find it sad that companies have to spend so much money on something that's really not useful, and most of that money goes to lawyers and not to customers or innovation in any way, but that's how it is.
All right. Amit, do you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, very similar thoughts. I think, I'm going to the point that people raised. So there's a line I read, like, strategies for amateurs, for pros, it's execution. And I think that really says out that if you can't execute, they don't deserve to win. And I think that should be a mantra regardless of whatever we are doing.
So I'm going to open it up for questions at this point, but while people decide to come up to stage, I'm going to have one question. What's your biggest surprise as a founder?
I have more empathy with entrepreneurs now.
Well, my surprise is, you know, when I was starting, I thought it would be easier. So that was, it took me some time. Like it's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing, and you just have to every step there will be downs, like all the time. Like, you know, so you just have to keep at it and keep working and finding a path to succeed at every step. And when I was starting, I didn't expect it would be. You know, I thought it would be like, you know, there are all these founders around here, and I got funding, so it should be easy now. But it's not. That's really just the beginning.
Okay. Yeah. So go ahead. Let's go ahead and ask. People ask questions.
Sham, IIT Kanpur 91. My question is to Amit or Bipul about product development, having a concrete idea and then building it versus a very agile approach. You both gave examples of waiting a long time to hire the right kind of people. That to me sounds waterfallish rather than getting started with 80% right people. So your thoughts around all the hype today about agile development and not making the long-term decision but make smaller pivots. Any thoughts on?
So getting 80% right is good for product, not for people. Because product you can iterate, very hard to iterate on people. You lose time and you lose the time to value. So you have to hire the right product, but you don't have to wait for a very long time. You can increase your effort and really, really find it, because as part of the entrepreneur, your job is to do things, hard things fast. So in terms of the building the product, I strongly believe that in the today's market, iterating your way to success is harder. It is harder because the product cycles have shortened. The time to scale and decline that used to be 15 years in the enterprise now is 6-7 years. So if you are too far off from the target, by the time you iterate to it, somebody will beat you to the market. So you need to do proper research and have a strong point of view. You succeed or fail, but it's very hard to iterate to it.
Yeah, to add to Bipul's point, so like in anything else, there's core and there's context. So you have to get the core architecture right in a product. If you don't get the core architecture right, nothing else will work. Similarly, in terms of the people, you have to get the core people right. And in fact, if you have good, strong core people, then you can iterate very quickly on the product itself. And there are a number of cases where, at least in our early life, we would make promises to the customers, knowing fully well that well before the customers could execute and demand that, we would execute and make the stuff available. So I don't think you lose agility by hiring good quality people. And even if you have to wait for good quality people, the returns you get are so tremendous, I would not second guess that.
Thank you.
Hello, Sanmeet from IIT Roorkee 2009. First of all, thank you for taking out the time to share your journey. Really good talk and loved it. My question is specifically for Jyoti. You said that initially you pitched to a lot of VCs, and in the end, you were able to get some funding. So what really did you learn from all these pitches? And from the first pitch to the last pitch, how did you evolve? And what did the VCs eventually look for that got them convinced to fund you?
Sure. Good question. It's my pitch definitely evolved. The first time I started pitching to VCs, I had a lot of rejections, and I think what I learned over time was that it's really at the very high level, VCs are looking for three things. And Bipul is a former VC, so he can probably add to that eventually. But the three things are: one is that you have to convince them that it's a $1 billion idea. Because the VCs are, the way their business model works is like, they're not looking for, they want go big or go home kind of business models. So if you convince them that this is an idea, it's a great idea, great need, but it cannot be as big as their business model requires, they won't fund you, right? So you have to make some kind of a convincing business case around that. That's the one thing. The second thing VCs are looking for is some kind of validation, right? So, it's validation from some, so that's when you hear the word like, you're not ready or you don't get more traction, that's really what they're looking for, some validation from other third parties on either from customers, prospects, someone, more validation. So the more validation you will have, the better your story improves, right? And the third thing they are looking for is why you? Like why you as the founding team, founders, entrepreneur, why you? Right? So because it's really about execution eventually, right? So most VCs understand that part, that it's what is the unique differentiating advantage that you would have to go and win in that market. So once, it took me some time to kind of just learn that it's these three things that I need to sell. And once I sell them effectively and I have the kind of the right pitch around why it could be a $1 billion company, why the market is large, when I had more validation, like, so I started going and finding prospective customers on LinkedIn to talk to so that I can get quotes from them and put them in my pitch that, that I've talked to these customers and these are the quotes from as validation from them to create validation. Like I didn't have any customers really, I didn't even have any product at that time, right? And then you also have to package yourself. You have to package yourself on why you have a unique advantage. Maybe you have a specific technical skill, maybe specific domain expertise, something around like why someone should invest in you being the winner of that particular problem space.
Bipul, you have a comment to make.
So one point to add is you want to pick your venture capitalists carefully because they're like really two kinds of venture capitalists. So one kind is people who have like prepared mind in the sense that they are knowledgeable about the space, they are knowledgeable about the business, how the businesses are built and broadly around the market and areas or expertise. So I, as an entrepreneur, always like go for people who have prepared mind, because otherwise if they're not prepared, then they will ask many people to form their opinion and they'll not have a strong conviction. So as we started working on our series A, B, C, we always looked for people who had like prepared mind. And that is a very important thing. Otherwise, you may have the greatest idea, but since they don't know anything about it, you could just be spinning. And time to value is the most important thing. So for you to pick the right venture capitalists and make sure that you get in front of them and tell your story.
Let's take the next question.
Hi, this is Srinivas from IIT Madras. I started learning that for a startup, starting is the biggest problem. And I want your suggestion, like for a person working full-time job and dwelling with an idea for a couple of years. So what are those starting steps should be, like when he has to leave the job, how to balance this job, income, and that secure comfort zone? What are you saying? I'm sure some of you would have gone through that.
I can give you my example. Like I was working in a good job. I didn't have much of family to support at that time, so it was a little bit easier for me on that question. But I was working on my job, coding on the idea that I had, and starting pitching to investors and all. And one of the investors I was talking to asked me, like, do you really believe in this idea? And I said, yes, I do. That's why I'm pitching you. So like, if you really believe in it, why are you in your job? And I really didn't have an answer to that question. And I went home and thought about it all night, like, okay, why am I still in my job then? Maybe I'll lose and I quit my job next day. But for me, it's like I set a timeline for me. Like, if I don't raise any venture capital or anything around it, I will bootstrap for the next 9 months. If I don't get any success in the next 9 months, I can always find a job as an engineer, and I have enough savings for to easily last the last 9 months, something like that, right? But everyone's situation is different, right? If you have, so you have to look at like, what's the risk you are willing to take, and what are the obligations that you have with in your personal life. But startup is inherently about taking some risk. If you try to play 100% safe, startup would be hard to get going. There is no guarantee at any stage in the startup. But at the same time, you also have to look at like, even if your startup fails, you can still go back to the kind of the job you have. Most likely the companies will, the same employer will hire you, and you can probably go into at a higher level because you have learned more in that 6 months, 9 months, 12 months of doing that startup there.
So we'll take one last question before we start to close the.
Thank you, gentlemen. This was very informative. I noticed all three of you had enterprise-focused products. Would your learnings, or would you have any different recommendations for a product that is consumer-based, like the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all, in terms of your approach to how far along you should be with the product, or in terms of seeking VC funding? Any thoughts there would be appreciated.
Anyone wants to?
I can take that. So in venture capital, I used to also invest in consumer companies. So I was fortunate to be one of the first investors of Pulse News that LinkedIn acquired, and other companies. I think the risk profile of consumer company is very different than enterprise company. In my mind, consumer company is more of an accident, and enterprise companies are more of a design. So depends on where you are in your professional and personal life. You have different risk profile. In terms of venture capital, in consumer companies, the initial investments are not very high. And given cloud and everything else, you can actually try on your own and see if your product works. So in terms of the basic risk taking, it's similar. But when it comes to actual venture capital, you need to have actual traction in your product to be able to go raise Series A, versus enterprise. If you have a unique angle in the market, even if you're not written a single line of code, you can raise venture capital.
So closing on the panel, any closing thoughts that any of you would like to talk about as part of this, and specifically, if anything that you regret that you wouldn't have wanted to, if you had to go back and look at something, do you have any regrets?
I think regrets is I don't have any regrets, and I'm really I feel that I made the right choice by jumping into leaving the job and starting the company, and going through the hard times there and everything that we did. So definitely no regrets. If I have to do it again, yes, definitely the experience helps in doing things differently, right? So it's like much more. Like the first time I did it, I had to learn everything as we went. Now it's like there is more experience, so it's if I do it again, I would do it differently. But still, at the same time, I don't regret anything from the last time.
It's awesome. We're learning from sitting by the fire.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree with Jyoti. So again, no regrets from this time, but my previous company, we did a lot of different things, and we're essentially constantly trying out new stuff every day, every week, every month. And I think this time around, we were a lot more deliberate, a lot more disciplined, a lot more thoughtful. And that's one thing I would suggest or request a change to say, don't be jumping into the new fire every single day. Try to figure out, try to think through, and then decide.
Okay, thank you. Vipul?
It's too early for me to have a judgment call. But one thing I would definitely say is we have a philosophy in Rubrik that as long as you're making more than 50% good decisions, you will live another day to make another more than 50% good decision. So there are a lot of things that we are learning. We are trying to minimize our mistakes, but when you want to drive fast, So if I'll do this all over again, probably I'll make the similar kinds of mistakes, but it's very fun to have this journey and this experience.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much for being on the panel. I'm sure you've enjoyed it a lot. I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.